My guess is you're paying attention a little more than you do at the start of most sermons. Anticipation is a funny thing, isn't it? Probably felt like it's been a couple of minutes, even though it's only been 35 seconds. Anticipation creates focus. Or maybe for you, it's created disappointment because you're kind of thinking like, wait, how many minutes do I have to wait for the pastor to show up before I can leave, like in college? We were well under the threshold. I don't have my doctorate, but it was less than a minute. Okay, so you got to stay. Anyway, anticipation is a powerful thing. And today, December the 1st, 2024, I want to welcome you, wherever you're joining us from, online, Odenton, Annapolis, I want to welcome you to the season of anticipation. It's the season of Advent. It's a time of year where we intentionally direct our attention towards something that will be, but that is not yet. And in eagerly waiting for this, with our focused hearts and with our focused minds, we are increasing our joy, we're experiencing peace, we're renewing our hope, and we're growing in love for God and love for others. If I didn't say it earlier, my name's Aaron. I'm one of our pastors here at Bay Area. We're glad you're with us this morning. And whether you know it or not, you have been anticipating this sermon for approximately, or I guess exactly, 1 year. And that is because I wrote this exact sermon for last year, for the week after Thanksgiving, and woke up that morning with a serious migraine and was unable to preach the sermon. And so Jason got the call that no one wants to get on a Sunday morning, which is that you're preaching. When, Greg? Now. So I don't know what your greatest fear is, but I'm assuming that like being informed you're preaching on the same morning you need to preach is probably like a new fear unlocked. So I'm glad to have done that for you. Jason was great last year, but I'm excited to finally give this message that I've been waiting to give for a year, because today marks the traditional beginning of the Christian season of Advent. What is Advent? Well, the word itself just means coming or arrival. And it's used to describe this 4-week period in the historic Christian calendar of a season of preparation for the arrival or the advent of the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. Bay Area is not a liturgical church in that sense, but that calendar, as it's sometimes called the liturgical calendar, can be a helpful way to orient our life together as believers around Christ and what he has done. And this specific practice of Advent we're going to talk about today, it's about 1,500 years old, but it's taken many variations across the world in different cultures. But the main point is always that we're focusing on the arrival of Jesus, and that the arrival of Jesus is too important of a thing for us to miss it. But someone might ask legitimately, like, okay, fine, that sounds cool, but the Bible doesn't tell us to do Advent, so why must I do Advent if it's not required? What's the value in this? I think that's a fair question, and depending on what tradition you grew up in, you might not have done this. I'm newer, actually, to the practice of Advent, and I found it to be very helpful to me. But in years past, we've spent sort of the whole sermon, and I've tried to dig into what are the biblical reasons for why this kind of a daily practice in anticipation of Christmas could be helpful to your spiritual growth. So I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to remind you of what we've said in years past about the value of this. And I'll say, you know, the Advent boxes or the Christmas boxes that our church puts together, man, there's so much in there that's of value. I almost feel like it doesn't need to be explained. If you've ever done one of these with your kids, you know they're so great. I have actually left the family Christmas box that I picked up a couple weeks ago. I have left it in my car, because if my kids see it, they will lose their minds, okay? So anyway, it's just so great for our family, but here are the reasons that I've given in the past. I just want to say them briefly, and then we'll move on to really what I want to get to today. But why should you do Advent? I would say because there is value in prioritizing the reality of who Jesus is. There is power in repeating. When we do the same things the same way each year, it gives them increased power. And then finally, there's joy in anticipating. Those are 3 reasons. Just like my sermon gets a little more interesting if I wait 30 seconds to start it, that anticipation spools up our joy, and we want to do that with the arrival of Christ. So those 3 reasons that there's value in prioritizing, power in repeating, and joy in anticipating. In other words, I could say it, that rituals rehearse to remind. Rituals rehearse to remind. But I have to give a warning that we are not doing this as a church family each year simply because it's a tradition, because the truth is anything done repeatedly but not intentionally will soon be done meaninglessly. It's possible you grew up in a tradition where things like this lost all meaning, and that's not because of the rituals themselves, but because of the lack of meaning that they were infused with. So we need to be intentional. That's why we put resources into this each year to make sure it stays fresh and connects with our hearts. But hopefully that's pushed you off the fence if you were thinking, I don't really want to do this. There are years past where we've really built the case for why you should participate in Advent. But now, I just want to shift to talk about what Advent represents. My main goal today is to walk through the 4 words of Advent and help us to learn them together. But this morning's going to have some group participation in it. So I just want to warn you, introverts, go ahead and start gathering some words that you might be able to share with some people around you, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But traditionally, some stripes of Christ followers have emphasized one word for each of the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. The 4 words are hope, peace, joy, and love. One word for each week. So the first week is hope, and that's what you would start on. And the idea is during that week, you remember the biblical meaning of that particular word, and then you reflect on the meaning of that word as it relates to the arrival of Jesus. So how does the birth of Jesus relate to the idea of having hope in God? That would be week one's emphasis. And so that's exactly what I want to do with the rest of our time this morning. But again, I want you to get involved. I don't want to spend the whole time talking at you. I'd love for you to do some of the work of gathering up what this might mean to you and for your life this year. So we're going to do this. We're going to explain one word at a time, and then we will discuss it together with the people around you. You'll have a time to respond. And I know some of you are panicking. You're like, how do I get out of this room as fast as possible, okay? But I just want you to know, this morning we have intentionally arranged the seating with our ushers that you are 73% guaranteed to be near an extrovert, and they're real excited about this, okay? So it's going to be okay. You can just let them do the heavy lifting. We want to be gracious to each other and just participate to the level that you feel comfortable this morning. And plus, it's the week after Thanksgiving, which means if you're at church, you're a hardcore Christian already, okay? Because that's the only people that come this week, okay? But we're going to jump in. And we'll give you instructions for each time, okay? So take a deep breath. It'll be all right. Let's start with the first word, hope. Hope. Biblically speaking, what is hope? Well, we tend to think of hope as a vague sense of optimism. It's associated basically with blindly believing that the future is going to get better despite all the data, right? And so by personality, some of you look at your life or the future and you're just saying, look, I hope for the best because I'm just an optimistic person. And some of you look at life and you're saying it doesn't give me much hope, right? And I get it. We think of it as a personality trait. We think of it as dependent on who I am, how I'm wired, or my circumstances. But the biblical idea of hope is much bigger. It's more resilient. Hope, biblically speaking, is confidence about the future based on the past. Confidence about the future based on the past. It's a conviction that things will go as God says, because God is the one who said it. In other words, his character, his track record, that is the reference point for biblical hope, not what's going on around me. It's why the Psalms say in Psalm 33, we wait in hope for my circumstances? No, for the Lord. Why? Because he is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. May your unfailing love be with us, Lord, even as we put our hope in an elected official, in my circumstances, in my family, in my 401k. No, in you. There's not a single reference to circumstance. This is a person filled with hope based on the character and capability of God. Biblical hope is rooted in a person and a promise, not in personality. Rooted in a person and a promise, not in personality. Okay, so much more we could say about biblical hope. Hopefully that makes some sense, though. And that's the word actually for this week of Advent, the very first week. And so it's your turn now to participate. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We've got to figure out now, together as you discuss it, how does Christ's arrival, the arrival of Jesus, his advent, how does it provide us with this biblical definition of hope? Something rooted in the character and promises of God, not in my own personality. I'm going to give you a timer on the screen so you don't have to wonder when to stop. Just turn to some people around you. Think about that for a minute. How does what we've learned about hope relate to the arrival of Jesus that we celebrate at Christmas? There are no wrong answers. Share a little bit. And if nothing else, talk about how glad you are to not be shoveling out the bills so they can play football today at 1 o'clock, okay? So here we go. Go ahead and discuss biblical hope and what it means related to Advent.
We got 4 minutes to lock in. How does Christ's advent
That wasn't so bad, right? That wasn't so bad. Most of you ran out of time before you ran out of words. That's a good sign. We can do this, okay? So let's talk about our second word. We've just talked about a hope. Let's talk about peace. And actually, to explain this second word, we're going to get to watch a video. And I want to tell you about the origins of this video. It's from the Bible Project. They're a group that puts together really, really helpful animated videos explaining various biblical concepts, overview of books, themes throughout the scriptures, really well researched. I highly recommend them. And if you want to watch more of these videos, actually the reading plan that we've put together for this year actually has the Bible Project videos on each of the 4 words of Advent. They've put together a great series. If you want to follow more of this content, you can get it on our website, bayareacc.org/Advent, or you can download the YouVersion app. You can download our app. There's a lot of different ways to get the Bible Project Advent reading plan, but I highly recommend that you do it. But let's go ahead and check out their video about peace.
The word peace is common in most languages. People can talk about peace treaties or times of peace. It means the absence of war. And in the Bible, the word peace can refer to the absence of conflict, but it also points to the presence of something better in its place. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. The most basic meaning of shalom is complete or whole. The word can refer to a stone that has a perfect, whole shape with no cracks. It can also refer to a completed stone wall that has no gaps and no missing bricks. Shalom refers to something that's complex with lots of pieces that's in a state of completeness, wholeness. It's like Job, who says his tents are in a state of shalom because he counted his flock and no animals are missing. This is why shalom can refer to a person's well-being. Like when David visited his brothers on the battlefield, he asked about their shalom. The core idea is that life is complex, full of moving parts and relationships and situations, and when any of these is out of alignment or missing, your shalom breaks down. Life is no longer whole, it needs to be restored. In fact, that's the basic meaning of shalom when you use it as a verb. To bring shalom literally means to make complete or restore. So Solomon brings shalom to the unfinished temple when he completes it. Or if your animal accidentally damages your neighbor's field, you shalom them by giving them a complete repayment for their loss. You take what's missing and you restore it to wholeness. The same goes for human relationships. In the book of Proverbs, to reconcile and heal a broken relationship is to bring shalom. And when rival kingdoms make shalom in the Bible, it doesn't just mean they stop fighting, it also means they start working together for each other's benefit. This state of shalom is what Israel's kings were supposed to cultivate, and it rarely happened. So the prophet Isaiah, he looked forward to a future king, a prince of shalom, and his reign would bring shalom with no end. A time when God would make a covenant of shalom with his people and make right all wrongs and heal all that's been broken. This is why Jesus' birth in the New Testament was announced as the arrival of eirene. Remember, that's the Greek word for peace. Jesus came to offer his peace to others, like when he said to his followers, "My peace I give to you all." The apostles claimed that Jesus made peace between messed up humans and God when he died and rose from the dead. The idea is that he restored to wholeness the broken relationship between humans and their creator. This is why the Apostle Paul can say Jesus himself is our eirene. He was the whole complete human that I am made to be but have failed to be. And now he gives me his life as a gift. And this means that Jesus' followers are now called to create peace. Paul instructed local churches to keep their unity through the bond of peace, which requires humility and patience and bearing with others in love. Becoming people of peace means participating in the life of Jesus, who reconciled all things in heaven and earth, restoring peace through his death and resurrection. So peace takes a lot of work, because it's not just the absence of conflict. True peace requires taking what's broken and restoring it to wholeness, whether it's in our lives, our relationships, or in our world. And that's the rich biblical concept of peace.
I highly recommend you check out more of their videos on all kinds of things, and especially this time of year, their reading plan is really helpful, again, available in a lot of different ways. But now that we've seen that definition, that's what peace is, that's what shalom is, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to discuss that. In what ways did Jesus' birth bring peace to the world? You've already got some answers that came from that video. But then I want to add another layer because the word Advent means arrival, but in more than one way. There's another future arrival of Jesus, and I want to add that layer to the discussion as well. In what ways will Jesus' future Advent or arrival bring shalom as well? So how did he bring shalom? How will he bring shalom? And even just anything else you've learned from those videos, feel free to discuss here for the next couple of minutes. Let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, we've talked about hope and peace. Let's move to our third word. It is joy. The third week of Advent, the word is joy. And the word joy, biblically speaking, is a loaded word. We've spent whole sermons on this word before, but a fascinating component of this word is that we're commanded to have it, even though joy is something we typically associate with a thing that just spontaneously arises within us, right? We're commanded to have a thing that we think I can't force myself to have. But Philippians 4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. In other words, we're told to take joy, take hold of it. That's what the word means. And so what is joy? Well, joy is a choice of thankfulness over bitterness, of contentment over envy. Joy is a state of happiness that is larger than our circumstances. A state of happiness larger than our circumstances. It is not independent from our circumstances. We can't be. But it is larger than our circumstances. It's related to the idea of hope that we talked about earlier. Even when things are hard, we don't just choose to confidently wait on God. That would be hope. We choose joy or happiness in the midst of that waiting for God's final redemption. We actually believe that it's in God's presence where we find fullness of joy. And what that means is that we can say joy to the world. Why? Because the Lord has come. The arrival of Jesus, his presence here on this earth and with us, is why we can have joy. Because being in his presence, being with him, being known by Jesus, that is fullness of joy. So if that's a quick look at the biblical meaning of joy, for our response, here's what I'd like for us to do. Okay, one of the best joy generators in life is gratefulness for what God has done. Gratefulness fuels hope. It stokes our joy. And so we're going to take a moment. We're going to spend the first minute of this timer. I would like for you to spend that minute quietly thinking of something that you're rejoicing in. It could be something that God has provided that you're thrilled about. It could be something actually really hard that you're choosing joy in the midst of. Either way, we'll give you about a minute to think of that thing, and then when the timer gets to 4 minutes, you can go ahead and start to share that with the people around you. And it could be that this is a somber moment. Somebody sharing something that means that they need a hug from you because of what they're going through. It could mean that it's a time to get a little rowdy. Somebody shares something that you're excited about. You can high five, you can hug for a different reason. Cheers, right? This is exciting. We're rejoicing together. Either way, we're convinced that there is, in fact, joy to the world through Jesus because of what he's doing in our lives. So we'll take the first minute to reflect, and then the remainder of the timer to share with those around us what we're rejoicing in. Let's go ahead and begin. Okay, I really hate to do this. I'm going to bring us back a minute early, and that's because in order for our children's ministry volunteers to choose joy today, we're going to need to end close to on time. So hopefully you had some great sharing there, seeing what's going on in the lives of people around you that you might not ever get a chance to chat with. But let's look at our final word. The word is love. Love. This is the word that's traditionally remembered in the week leading up to Christmas. And I think that's beautiful because even though the word love is tossed around for everything these days, there's a biblical meaning that's more significant. Now, I love this definition. You've heard, I'm sure, similar things before. It's that love is not primarily a feeling. It is an action to seek the good of others without expectation of anything in return. That's a biblical definition of love. And that comes straight from the life of Jesus. It comes straight from the scriptures that God is himself love, and God consistently chooses to act toward humanity in ways that will produce our good, even when we do nothing for him in return, in fact, in spite of our behavior toward him. Romans 5 says that God shows his love for us in this. How? That while we were still sinners, enemies of God and separated from him, that's when Christ died for us. That's the heart of what Jesus came to do, to provide the possibility of true love between humans and between God and humanity. The life of Jesus and ultimately his death, it's the only thing that produced the conditions necessary for humanity to have this kind of selfless love. The greatest act of love is the death of Jesus made possible by the birth of Jesus. John said that greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. And so it makes sense that in the final week of Advent, we would focus on this great act of love where God himself puts on flesh to show us what love really looks like. And so how do we respond? Well, this is going to be a little different. I'm going to give you a shorter timer. And what I'd like for you to do is actually to think of a person or a moment in your life where you experienced a demonstration, a person putting on true love toward you. Okay, I want you to think of a moment or maybe a person who seems to consistently act in your best interest even when they receive nothing in return or even with no expectation of anything in return. Who's someone who embodies that kind of Jesus-like love for you? And then I would like for you to think about what might you say to that person if they were sitting right next to you. In fact, they might be sitting right next to you. But regardless, I want you to think, what might you say to that person? To thank them for how they show what Jesus is like in your life. Maybe you even think of some things and send a text. Maybe you write a letter. Maybe you let somebody know how they've shown love toward you in a selfless way. Maybe this person is already with Jesus. And so maybe what you do, instead of, since you're unable to send them a text, maybe what you do is think, how can I do for others what they did for me? They were channeling the love of Jesus toward you. Maybe you channel it toward someone else because of their influence on your life. Just take a couple of minutes, think, who's someone who's demonstrated selfless love toward me? And how can I either thank them or emulate them? Let's just take a couple of minutes and do that. thank you all for your participation today. I know this is a little bit different. This is not how we normally do things, but I think there's so much to be gained in us sharing and exploring some of these ideas together. And I'm hoping maybe you are going to send a text or say some words or write a letter or make a phone call today that will let someone know the ways that they have channeled the genuine, selfless love of Christ toward you. There might be some hope, some peace, some joy that are generated from that act of love today. And as we head into this Advent season, like I said, we've got great resources on our website, bayareacc.org/Advent or /Christmas. Either way, you'll get there to find the resources that we put together for both adults and students. And hopefully you got one of the boxes where you can do this together as a family, maybe especially with younger kids. We're just so thrilled that we get to spend this season together, especially next week when we kick off our series called Down to Earth, reflecting on the importance of Jesus coming to put on flesh. There are some ways in which the humanity of Jesus is so important to our salvation, and maybe in ways you've never thought about. So I'm excited to invite and see you all next week as we continue heading toward Christmas, talking about Jesus coming down to earth. Thanks for being here, and go in peace.
Feels like such a miss.